Hey, bot builders, this is your event organizer checking in from One Elitch Arena. I want to welcome you to the 2019 Rocky Mountain Gear Jam Selection Show, and thank you for joining us. Today you'll be finding out about what group you'll be placed in for the first round of our tournament, as well as we're going to have interviews with the Robert Cowan, competitor from Team Copperhead in this year's BattleBots season. We'll also be interviewing one Isaak Malers, one of the best in the business in terms of creating 3D printed bots, and Jeff Waters, who's created a design that you may recognize from some of our BattleBots competitors. So thanks for joining us. We're going to get to it quickly and announce some of the groups for our beetleweight division, but then we'll be getting into the interviews and the ant weights. So stick with us, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be with Robert Cowan. You probably recognize him from Team Copperhead. He has a pretty good standing here in the robot community. He has a ton of experience, and he's been gracious enough to spend a little time with us and answer a couple of questions that both we've come up as a group and then that have actually been emailed to me before the event. So the biggest thing, Robert, we want to start talking to you about Psychotic Break, the one you've kind of been letting us follow in with. We're about a month away from the event. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling okay. It's a big build. I think this is probably one of the more complicated builds I've ever taken on. I think I probably have maybe more time and effort into this than I do even Crippling Depression. I'm doing, with the video, getting everything set up and filming everything, it takes a lot of time. So it's a bigger build than I anticipated, but I think it's going okay.
Excellent. What were kind of your goals with the build? It's pretty unique and ambitious. So you had probably a pretty good list when you started. What got you going on this project?
Yeah, I think for me, I've done okay with Sergeant Cuddles in the ant weight class. I've done well with Crippling Depression at the featherweight class, but I've never really built a solid competitor in the beetleweight class. I've had Long Man's like Anxiety Attack and then Kamikaze. I've never really done well in the beetleweight, but every beetle I've ever done has kind of been like a weekend before. Long Man was the weekend before, Kamikaze was the weekend before. So what I wanted to do is just step back and create a beetle that I know is going to do well at a competition. So that was kind of the goal, and also to sit back and film the whole process to kind of go through all the little phases just to show how much work is involved in one of these.
So we kind of found out the matchups today. So it's a World Cup style tournament. You're going to be with two other robots. And so we found out today that you're going to be with the CU team, Titanium Joe, who just attended Colorado Bot Battles, as well as Barracuda. Something we don't know a ton about. It's a new build, so we're anxious to see it. But overall, what is Psychotic Break's strengths and weaknesses? Who does he match up well against? Who does he struggle against?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I've never really done a horizontal mid cutter before, so this is kind of a new design for me. That's, the other reason I'm doing Psychotic Break is I've always kind of wanted to do one of those tombstone style things. So yeah, it's a new design, so I don't really know exactly how it's going to work out. But I think anything vertical, I'm going to be fine with. I like vertical spinners because the gyro effect and just where the weapon hits, I want to ride up that wedge, and I love hitting weapon to weapon. So if there's a weapon that I can hit, that's what I want to hit. So, like yours, if I can just ride up and take off the weapon, that's the ideal.
Break off the top of it. He's referring to McWedgie, who has a nice little tab at the top of it, just waiting to get knocked off.
Yep.
So he's on the middle of a redesign right now. But he's going to have the same problem. So
yeah. So I think,
all right, excellent. One of the big things, Robert, is you've competed at the highest level. You've done BattleBots, and what's part of that competition that fans may not expect, may not know? I mean, you've been in a couple of them now.
Yep. I think the biggest thing that I learned from being on BattleBots is the actual competition side of it is really no different. It's just like any other competition that you go to, AVC, Motorama, whatever. It's pretty much the same thing. But the kind of event surrounding it is much more collaborative. I know, we always kind of say that, oh, everyone helps everyone. But with BattleBots, it takes it that one step further, that before a match, it's like, what do we do to put on a good show? And that's really what we're more focused on. Is it's a TV show first, and it's a competition second. So how do you make the show the best that it can be? Because we're all hoping that the show continues, because then the sport's going to continue. So we don't really care about being selfish, let's say, and getting the win. It just needs to be a good match. So I think that's the biggest thing that I had as a takeaway.
I think that's a lot of thing that fans, when they're writing on boards or watching the show, they don't take into account. They assume it's competition first and there's no other factor. The TV show part of it is huge. That's a balance I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Scorpios fight was a great example, because we were in line with them for several hours waiting to go into the arena, and I mean, we're talking the whole time, and it's like, oh, we really like this about you, and in the normal competitions, you're kind of lining up the wedges and lining up the weapons to see who hits who. And at BattleBots, it's a little bit more like, oh, you're going to hit us right there, and that piece is going to come flying off, and that's going to be great. The crowd's going to love that, and it's much more like, what can we do to give them a good show?
Cool.
So it's very
cool. Other than size of the robots, what's different in the competitions when you're driving it and building it? I mean, the size, there's certain things you expect. What's another thing?
I think, the biggest thing that I realize is every piece is so heavy. Especially with Copperhead, it doesn't have that many pieces, and all the pieces are really heavy. It's actually just sitting back down over there. I don't know if I can. No, it's right behind that workbench. But everything is just so heavy. I mean, like that top panel is, 1/4-inch AR-500, and that weighs like 15 pounds. And you're sitting there building this thing over, the month or 2 months, and everything just starts to get heavy. You start to drop stuff, your hands start to get cut, and it's like, oh, we'll just grab the drum and grind it down. Well, you got to lift up this 50-pound thing and set it down. So I think the weight is a big one, and you can't casually test anything. You really have to think things through. So, especially ours is like chain drive. So if you're testing out the drive, we had to put it up on the bench, clamp it down, make sure nothing was going to come into contact with the chain. And, everything's just a little bit more scary, but generally speaking, it's pretty similar.
Yeah, that safety factor is taken to 1,000% with the BattleBot, the forces you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the other big part, a lot of people know you, is your YouTube series. You do a great job of illustrating a lot of points that come up and what a lot of new builders struggle with. I know whenever we get a message from the website, typically the first place we send them is your series, because it's just such a great starting guide. What inspired you to start that? I mean, it's a lot of work to do all that stuff. What kind of keeps you going and keep doing that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. So I started, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago, something like that. And I worked with Casey Coons, who Electric Lawn Gnome Supremacy. He's also on the Copperhead team. He was on the Poison Arrow team as well. I worked with him. He was an engineer. And at the time, I had no idea that BattleBots was a thing. I mean, I knew it was a thing, but I didn't know it was still happening. I saw it on like the old Comedy Central days, stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is still a thing you're building. And I didn't know the different weight classes, all that stuff. And so he kind of got me into it. But if anyone knows Casey, he doesn't really tell you a lot of answers. And he's kind of one of the old school builders that is just like, yeah, try it out. And so I would ask him, I'm like, has anyone ever done like a drum in a 1-pounder? And he's like, try it out. And I'm like, how would this work? Try it out. And I found it very frustrating that, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of gatekeeping in combat robots, or there used to be. It used to be that, people would figure out how to epoxy a motor and they would just hide that secret away and no one would talk about it. And you'd build your first bot, go to a competition, just get destroyed and lose. And then the builders would come up to you afterwards and they're like, hey, I saw your bot. If you just do this and you just do this, it's going to be better. And I realized that information really needed to get out there. And I think we've seen a big acceleration of people sharing information. And ant weight competitions are a lot more competitive now than they were 5 years ago. People are starting to get, a lot better at this stuff. So that was just kind of my motivation, is there's a lot of information and it just needs to get shared somehow.
That's a great reason. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Over the years, what's been your favorite build? What one have you enjoyed most, either competing with or building?
Oh, was that you or me? My favorite build, man, that's a tough one. I think maybe crippling depression. It seems like kind of the obvious answer, but I knew enough of what I was doing at the time, and there was a lot of things that I was doing differently. And the thing that I like most about crippling depression was a lot of people kind of messaged me when I was, doing the first introduction overview stuff of it. And they're just like, oh, don't do an undercutter. The box isn't going to work. Typically undercutters are 2-wheel drive. So you really should be doing a 2-wheel drive. And it was nice to see all the, criticism, don't use 2 weapon motors. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I just kind of ignored that because I'm like, yeah, I want to try this out. And the fact that it ended up actually working, I think that's why I like it the best, is because it was a really underestimated bot the first 2 competitions. And so it was nice to see people underestimate it. And it kind of, it made people realize that you can try some different things, because it was pretty stagnant. Everything was a vertical spinner at that point. So yeah, I think that was my favorite.
In the next competition, I don't think you have to worry too much about being underestimated at any point. I think you're going to be fighting more of the perennial favorite role for a little bit.
Yeah, that's the bummer. And that's why, Psychotic Break is very different. I've talked about this in one of my videos, that with the first version of Crippling Depression, I really wanted it to be a box. It had to be a box. It had to be simple. The weapon was kind of hidden. And I really wanted people to look at it and discount it. And Charles Guan, Overhaul, when we were at Motorama, he was in line next to me, and he was just kind of touching at it. And he's just like, is that plastic? And I'm like, yeah, it's plastic. And he had not really heard much of me. He'd maybe seen a couple videos, hadn't really watched the videos. And, I beat Overhaul. And then he came up to me afterwards. He's like, okay, what are you using? What's in here? And he started asking all these questions. But that's what Crippling Depression was supposed to be. Is it was supposed to be this bot that no one would pay attention to. It was just black. It was simple. And I went for that. And then after people started realizing what it was, then it started getting fancier, and I started dealing more with the paint, doing cool things with it. I've kind of lost that ability for all my bots going forward, unfortunately.
Function first, fashion second.
Yep.
Well, excellent. Well, with all that being said, the big question is, we've got a lot of teams coming. We've got 18 competitors this year. Yep. So is Psychotic Break going to take home the first annual first place trophy for the Beta Weights in the Rocky Mountain Gear Jam?
No. I always say that BattleBots or combat robots is always paper, rock, scissors. Yeah. And if you're a rock, you're not necessarily going up against scissors. You don't know really what you're going up against. Someone could bring a ball of duct tape with a couple wheels, and it might be difficult for me. You don't know what you're going up against. And also, It's not done.
Oh, look at that.
So, here it is in its current state. I think next Sunday, maybe, I'm going to have the next video on this and show kind of the design. But it does have a body, and, here it is. But this isn't finished. This is a first generation robot, and this is, I don't know, like 1,500 joules, so 1.5 kilojoules in a Beetle. It's maybe not going to stay together. We saw what happened with this same weapon bar with Anxiety Attack.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I don't know how this is going to go. I hope it's going to do well, but it could just explode. But first generation bots are always tricky.
I think one way or another, there's going to be an explosion.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, I've still got, so this is still the wood prototype. And so back there in the corner is the mill. So I just got this together yesterday, and this has to machine all of these pieces. So I've got a good months of work ahead of me. So we'll see if I can get ready by the 24th.
Yeah, deadline's always approaching with these competitions.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Robert. We really appreciate you joining us today. It's an awesome opportunity to get to talk to somebody with so much experience.
Sure, of course. Yeah, thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for joining us. We had our first interview, and then we announced a couple more of the groups, and now we'll be joined by Isaak Malers, a longtime competitor in the sport, and he's very, very knowledgeable and talented in the 3D printing world. So we're going to introduce, right now you're looking down at red die number 5, one he'll be entering in Rocky Mountain Gear Jam. So Isaak, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as a builder first? How many competitions do you think you've been to in total, and how long you've been doing this?
I've been doing this for 6 years and probably at least 18 competitions, probably more. Enough that I don't know how many I've been to.
That's a lot of experience. You've made a lot of different builds. Death by a Single Cut, another one of your robots, is a very ambitious build. So what are some of the big challenges you've had in the design and competing with it, and where'd the inspiration come from?
Yeah, I've got some of the parts of Death by a Single Cut here. It got pretty destroyed in its last competition, so not much is left. But I basically wanted to use this edger blade in a robot. And the edger blade weighs 7.8 ounces, which is kind of light for a Beetle and really, really heavy for an Antweight. So I spent probably about a year trying to figure out how I was going to make this edger blade work on an Antweight. And I wound up building this crazy overhead bar spinner with the edger blade. This is just the spare chassis, but it kind of goes like that. And so really that entire robot was just inspired with like, how can I make the edger blade fit and work in an Antweight? So every single other aspect of the robot is just compromised to get as light as possible on everything to fit enough weight for this blade.
Isaak, red die number 5 has been placed with one of the Black Knights from the Fairview Robotics team, as well as Tashi, a robot we've seen compete before. So overall, what does red die 5 do really well against, and what does he struggle against? What are strengths and weaknesses?
I kind of built Red Die as a very conservative build. So it's got a lot of armor. The weapon isn't too crazy. I'm not doing anything crazy with drivetrain like brushless. So a lot of the like randomness that would afflict other robots, I don't really think is going to be a problem for Red Die 5. So I would say that I have like even odds against pretty much any type of design. I guess worst case scenario would probably be if I were up against another robot exactly similarly designed to this with just more aggressive weapon. So if I was against a robot that had just a way faster tip speed on the weapon, it could be really bad because I would never be able to get a good impact face-to-face with them. But even that, I think, wouldn't be too bad. I mean, he's got the big ablative wedge up front, and as long as I can get underneath people, it should be okay.
When you first started, Isaac, what part of bot building or combat robot building in general did you know the least about, and how did you kind of go about it, learning about it, and get ready?
I think that the thing that I knew the least about was probably materials, because without very much experience, you don't know the difference in strength between different plastics, right? You could say nylon and ABS, they're both just plastics. What's the really big difference? And you know that steel is stronger than aluminum, but maybe you've ever only really worked with like low carbon sheet metal steel, and you're like, well, steel's not really that much stronger than aluminum. So I think the big thing that I've gained more experience with is knowledge of specific materials that are kind of defy your expectations. Like this nylon that I used for Red Die number 5 is just super tough compared to any other type of plastic you could use. And I think that's probably one of the tougher things to learn about, because it's just kind of an intuition about how a material is going to perform in combat.
Well, and speaking about the nylon, the 3D printing, you've become very knowledgeable about it. At every competition, people kind of talk to you about it because how good you are at it. How'd you learn about 3D printing, and how'd you get it so honed in?
I bought a 3D printer in 2013 from Folgertech, and I got the Delta 3D printer. Those are the ones that are really cool to look at, and I ran that for about a year and fiddled with it, and then eventually I got fed up with it, and I bought another 3D printer and ran that for about a year and fiddled with it, and eventually got fed up with it, and I bought another 3D printer. So I think really the way I've honed all of these skills is just by continually trying to upgrade my 3D printing, continually trying to upgrade my capability to 3D print quality parts.
Excellent. So what do you think the chances are on August 24th, in the end of the afternoon, after a long, hot day, that Red Die number 5 is going to be bringing home the #1 trophy?
That's hard to predict. It seems like the guy who wins the guy who wins the whole thing is usually the guy who goes into every match working great. You know, there's a lot of robots that just kind of like have electrical gremlins, or they take a big hit at the start of the day and it messes it up. And so this guy is pretty reliable. You know, I was really conservative with everything. So as long as he doesn't just get totally trashed by some huge horizontal spinner or something like that, I think he should do pretty well.
Welcome back, guys. We're going to get with our third interview for the show, and what will be also our final interview. It's going to be with Jeff Waters. He's out of Las Vegas, actually, and he is a regular at most events. He's been traveling most of the country, competing in some of the biggest events the sport has to offer. So welcome, Jeff.
Hey, how you doing, man? It's good to be on the show.
I appreciate it. So I appreciate you joining us. So Jeff, I think anyone who's been to an event recently has probably seen you there and seen one of the bots you compete with. How long have you been competing?
Uh, actually, this upcoming weekend will be 1 year since my first competition, so it's not
Excellent.
hasn't been very long at all.
No, 1 year, but you've been busy. What kind of got you into it?
Uh, I used to do drone racing. I used to do RC cars, so they kind of just like came together. But as far as building goes, I had a build probably about 3 or 4 years ago when I first discovered the scene. It was a called Pinball Wizard, and it was a omnidirectional beetle that I was working on that had two little lifters that would go like this, and they were probably about 4 inches long. But I built the bot. I heard about Destruction of the Stars about when they did that, when the first one, probably about 2016 or something like that. But it came out to 4.5 pounds, and I gave up for like 2 years.
The old weight problem.
Oh yeah,
Common problem in our sport.
oh yeah, especially for my first build.
It's something we all encounter. So Jeff, one of your most popular builds that people know it when they see it, and it's definitely traveled the circles, is Wumbo. And so what inspired Wumbo? How did you kind of get started building him? And tell us a little bit about his story.
All right, so Wumbo started on a thread on Chimp Posting about a year ago. Actually, little less than a year ago today is when it was first created. But we were doing mashups of bots, and so I had two favorite bots at the time were Huge and Tombstone. So I ended up just combining the two using a plastic int I had at the time that I designed called Fidget Stone, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a fidget spinner. It's a big old plastic tombstone with fidget spinner for the
I
weapon.
don't think I've seen that. Okay.
It's on Thingiverse. I can drop the file if you want to see it. But yeah. So Fidget Stone was what it started with, and we were doing the mashup. Someone created a picture. I think it was me or someone else. I can't find it. I looked back to find it, but they just took like Huge's wheels and put it on Tombstone. So I was like, all right. So like later that day, I took two printer spools and hot glued them to the side of Fidget Stone and did a drive around with that. And it's like I had like a dumb idea and it just clicked. So I was like, okay, I got to build this just for the memes. Then
Yeah.
I found out
a long way.
Destruction Under the Stars was literally 8 days away. I had no bot, I had no design, and there was a competition the following Saturday. So I was like, okay, let's do this. So it ended up getting built in like 8 days from design phase to a final product competing at an event, and it sucked. Boy, did it suck.
Yeah, those deadlines can be rough.
No, not that sucked. The bot sucked.
Oh.
So I had a actually since then the main design hasn't changed too much, except what changed is the hardware that's in it. It started with a dual FingerTech, the FingerTech blades, and they were stacked.
Yep, I remember that at Steamfest.
Yeah, Steamfest. I still have that weapon at Steamfest. It's come a long way since then.
Mm-hmm.
But it was driven by a 2204 little itty bitty small guy with a 3D printed pulley that was like super loose. It kept falling off every match. But I had to run it loose because the motor had no torque to it at all, so it could never get spun up. But so I had that. Then I had the 25D. It's not a planetary. It's basically a big N20.
Oh, okay.
With a can around it.
Okay.
It's not very durable, but it was the Team Dark Forces 5-minute motor at the time, so that's what I built.
Okay.
Which that drive with those big wheels and almost no reduction.
Yeah.
I wish I can find some videos of that first fight. But
those videos are always hard to find sometimes, especially when you first start out. When you first started building, when you talk about Wumbo and first started, what did you know the least about in terms of building robots, and how did you kind of navigate that and learn about something you knew nothing about to begin with?
Well, I learned I need a bigger weapon motor. That's the first thing I learned. So after Destruction Under the Stars, I had to do so much learning. I learned so much from Jeremy and a few other people that were down there. Jeremy built a Sandstorm, but you might have seen that. It's the purple vertical spinner. He fights maybe once a year. I learned from him. Then I learned stuff from Tommy and Kyle that was down there. Kyle that runs Mr. Roomba.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very active on the boards.
Yeah, he's very active as well. Yeah, so I learned a lot from them that weekend, a lot like ESC tuning and whatnot. And I also learned I should not be making my own fingertech switches because that's what killed me both my rounds. Let's put it this way. I got KO'd by a D2 wedge.
Oh.
That's how bad my power system was.
Switch? Okay.
Yeah.
That's an important lesson. Don't make your own switches unless you're very confident.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a lot of issues with switches over a while. Now I got it all fixed. I'm running a switch from a 12-pounder in my freaking Wumbo. It works, so.
So you compete in both ant weights and beetle weights, and you do very well in both. What's kind of the big difference between the two, and what do you like about one that you don't necessarily in the other, and that part of it?
It's a hard one to discuss between the two classes because in beetles, I've only fought with Wumbo. And Wumbo isn't the pinnacle of builds. Like, he's fun, he's tough now, like he can take a hit, but he's not gonna go out there and dominate like a run-of-the-mill vertical spinner would, or vice versa. But
you're selling yourself short. Steamfest, you did pretty darn well.
Yeah, at Steamfest I did well because I had that huge X factor. Steamfest was my first fight with the current version of Wumbo. That between Destruction Under the Stars and Steamfest last year, I had no fights. Wumbo never fought. It was just all me tinkering and do stuff. I was supposed to attend Arizona in between that in November, but stuff happened. There was a small house fire in my house, unrelated to bots.
Yeah, that'll interrupt the travel schedule.
Yeah, so it happened like 2 days before the event, so I was like, I can't go now.
Yeah, that's gonna take it out. You do a lot of 3D printing in your builds. How'd you get started in 3D printing, and what did you learn, or what did you use to learn about 3D printing?
The 3D printing, I started with a Maya M150, which is a i3 clone that Bobby King used to sell. And I had a Flexion extruder and all of that, so I used to do flux filament. But when I first started, I had no clue what I was doing. It was just made a spending filament, and there was warp lines and all that. And I thought, oh, wow, this is so cool. But I didn't learn anything about like layer adhesion and all that until the last probably year or so. But when I first got started, it was just good. Basically, I would have my buddy come over that knew 3D printing, set it up for me, and I wouldn't touch anything on it. Then the first thing I learned was like bed leveling and whatnot. That's just gonna be your basic. I remember flow rates and infill, and once I got that figured out, I started playing with more exotic filaments. Like my current filament of choice is polypropylene, which is an amazing material. Oh my god, I wish it was allowed in plastic again, so it would be OP. But polypropylene is what Wumbo is 90% consisted of.
And how's that different than what people are more kind of familiar with, the PLAs, the ABSs, the nylons?
I got a piece right here. The thing about polypropylene is it can do this.
Incredibly flexible.
And it comes right back to its shape.
That's pretty cool.
But it has its benefits and its drawbacks. At Arizona, when I was fighting, it wasn't Little Ragnarok. It was almost like a Deep Six style.
Big vertical.
Big vertical that can reach my body, which that's my main advantage is no one can reach me. So he hit me in the back and it a good example is it flexed in like this
Uh-huh.
and took out part of my carbon fiber and my BEC with it.
Oh, okay.
Actually, come here, Wumbo. Right here. I still have the carbon piece.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so it took that big of a chunk out. It just went.
Jeez. Yeah, it flexes until a lot of space is taken up. Do you plan on doing any heavier bot builds in the future, or are you going to stay centered around the beetle weights and ant weights?
I am tiptoeing my way into 12s right now.
Okay.
I'm talking with Chris and Isaac about maybe doing a 12-pound.
Some of our local Colorado guys, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe actually taking this thing up to 12-pound.
I could do that fairly, not easily, but it wouldn't be a stretch to try and add a couple pounds to him and just make him on a larger scale.
Either that or my 12-pound I was thinking about is what I'm concepting with my plastic ants. I'm using my plastic ants to figure out designs that I like, and I'm really set on saws right now. So
yeah,
I wouldn't. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch to take and build a 12-pound saw. Mm-hmm. I have so much stuff from work I'd be able to use for a saw. Just from my construction industry.
Uh-huh. Well, Jeff, with what would you give someone who's just starting out, who would maybe come to this event in August? What kind of best advice would you give them as they're getting started? What would you wish you had known a year ago?
Ooh, that's a tough one because I've learned so much in the past year. Like I didn't know anything. Like I didn't even know what the numbers in like a 2204 meant and all that until recently. But it'd be probably best to if I started talking with some of the builders more from the get-go because I was so quiet and shy at my first event.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to talk to them.
Go and ask questions.
Well, and I've been paying it forward with like my buddy Robert, who's out here in Vegas, who is competing with this little guy right here. This is what he threw together. Little undercutter, 150 grand ferry. But I wish you need to find someone that's like friendly and just talk to them. Okay. And even if like they're not super knowledgeable, they know enough to get you going.
Makes sense.
It's a good community, basically. What I say, and you got to get involved in the community to learn more.
Agreed. All right, Jeff. Well, here's the big question. You know what the last question I've asked everyone so far is, and I've gotten a couple different answers. I'm anxious to see what yours is. August 24th. It's going to be a nice summer event. We're going to be outdoors all day. At the end of the day, is Wumbo or Purple Nurple and Jeff going to be holding a first place trophy?
If Purple Nurple holds together.
Okay.
Like the way it is.
Confident about him?
Purple Nurple already won an event.
Okay.
It went undefeated in Bay Area bot battles.
Nice.
Or Bay Area Robot Combat, BARC. That's that's ran by Brandon Kittredge out of out of the Bay Area.
Nice. So you feeling pretty confident with him going into this one?
I feel confident with the new motor system I got. His motor's gonna be stronger, and if that holds, I think Purple Nurple can go all the way.
Nice.
And then as far as Wumbo goes, if I get a good matchup throughout the event, I should be doing all right. If the bots I'm worried about right now is Billy. Billy's
he did very
nasty.
well in Colorado bot battles.
Yeah. I was talking to Isaac, and I think right die number 5 has enough reach to hit my body. So that was also an issue. So
we've seen that design work very well. He's very strong with the bite force. That bot is.
Yeah, right die number 5 is nasty. Same thing with like between those two bots plus Robert Cowan's new bot that what's the name of that horizontal he's building?
Psychotic Break.
Psychotic Break. I keep watching the videos and I always forget the name. But if you watch my fight in Seattle against a very similar design to Psychotic Break, you can just see how I got annihilated with my new wheel or with my old style wheels.
A horizontal spinner like that.
Well, that's why I got those little guys right there. Those little foam things that look like layers on a cake. That's what those are for. they'll gum up the blade, so it'll kind of slow
Yeah.
it down a little bit. They're
It's all
like,
about strategy and re-strategy.
yep, they're 1 inch thick and they're made of EVA foam.
Very
They're
nice.
so they're the same wheels that Billy runs,
Okay.
but they're a 1/4 inch more thick.
Nice. And no longer will Billy have the biggest wheels of the competition.
No. Yeah,
Well, excellent, Jeff. We really
very-
appreciate you taking the time to kind of answer some of the questions. We're going to finish and answering a couple more of the groups, and we look forward to seeing you in August.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I think I'm landing there that Friday night before, so
Okay.
I'll be definitely there for whatever we're doing that weekend.
Excellent. Well, Bot Builders, I appreciate you joining me on this Selection Sunday show. I know it's short and sweet. We went through a lot of information. Hope you enjoyed some of the interviews, and ultimately we look forward to having you out here in August. I think it's going to be a great event. I look forward to some great competition. Don't forget, you'll also be seeing Hostbot there, also known as McWedgie. He looks forward to competing to what you have to offer. So until we see you on August 24th, this is your event organizer with Colorado Combat Robotics Club signing off. See you soon.